The pass rush looked really good, but offensive line depth is quickly becoming like my biggest concern. Can the offensive line hold up this season? Plus, more thoughts on TVD.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I'm your host, Ryan Harings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, really do appreciate every single person. All right, so talking about the practice we saw yesterday, the one that was open to the public. I didn't do a show after because I just had a bunch of other things to do, but I want to talk about what we saw there and two specific things that I think stood out. The first is the pass rush, right? An issue last year. They had to manufacture a lot of pass rush. They had to find ways to get there. And even then, it felt like a lot of times against the better teams, we weren't hitting home. Wisconsin wasn't getting there. We saw a lot of getting there in practice. Now, you can't hit quarterbacks, but if you're up in the stands and there's I was up there with Curtis and Justin, and we were talking about it, watching it, and it's like, oh, that would have been a sack. That would have been a sack. I mean, there were multiple moments where it felt like the pass rush not only would have got home, but would have got home in enough time where the quarterback really didn't have an opportunity to scan the field, make that second or third read. So that's encouraging. One of the things I would push a little bit is a lot of that pressure is coming either against the two deep offensive line, the second string offensive line, or it's coming out of blitz packages. So in a way, they're still manufacturing that pressure, but that's okay. That's kind of what Luke Fickell and Tressel want this defense to be, right? They want it to be a little multiple. They want it to be disruptive. They want to bring pressure from different areas. We saw Wohler come a couple times. We saw Zachman come. We saw Owen Arnett come, all from the secondary spots. We saw Nizer Forkreen come once. Linebackers coming from different angles. Jaheim Thomas looks really good there. Pius, Lowry had a nice play come from the backside. Christian Allegro from the inside. That dude packs a wallop. He packs a wallop. He rocked Joe Brunner on an inside blitz. So that was really great to see. Those linebackers are shaping up to be what we kind of thought they would be, right? Coming into practice, we said, I think that linebacker group has a chance to be really good. They have a chance to be really disruptive. They have a chance to be flexible. They have a chance to bring pressure and disruption from multiple angles and multiple levels. They've shown all that. And I think there was some bursts from the defense line as well. Curtis Neal has shown some stuff. This wasn't a practice I saw a ton of Brandon Lane, but he's flashed. James Thompson Jr. has flashed at times. So the pressure was good. That was encouraging. Let's flip to the other side, which is the offensive line. The offensive line quickly, I think, has become like my biggest concern this year. I think and it's not the starters. It's just the depth is so young and inexperienced there. I think the title of the show might have been, Can the Offensive Line Hold Up? Or at least that's the YouTube thumbnail, because I think that's the question. Can the offensive line hold up through the course of a Big Ten season, through the rigors of a long physical season? Can the offensive line hold up? I don't know. I really don't know. Like the two deep offensive line that we've seen, Joey Okla, we've seen transfer from Illinois, who didn't play a lot there. We've seen Coverly, freshman, Jensen, freshman, Kevin Haywood, freshman. We've seen Manny Mullins, Derek Jensen, freshman. So when you see that two deep defensive line go up against the two deep offensive line, the number two defensive line versus the number two offensive line, the number two defensive line has been kind of getting the most of that. And it's because there's a lot of youth and experience that really shouldn't be asked to play so soon on a Big Ten team. And some of that is, you look back at previous offensive line classes, players that, why are we in the spot we're in? Well, it's a lot of players that were recruited that didn't pan out, that transferred, that effectively just didn't work out, whatever the reason, whether you want to put it on strength and conditioning, recruiting evals, coaching transition, whatever it is, it doesn't matter, right? Ultimately, it doesn't matter. You are who you are, and you go into the season with what you got. But that is a very thin spot, and maybe the most not talked about talking point. That wasn't worded very well, but maybe the most under talked about thing here has been the injury to Leighton Nelson, right? The offensive tackle transfer from Vanderbilt. I mean, he would have been your number two tackle on both sides of the line. He would have been your backup. It's okay if somebody gets dinged up, because we saw in practice Kevin Haywood getting reps with the ones. Kind of stepping in there to get some reps. And he looks incredible for a true freshman. Like, he looks the part, he moves well, he's competing, he's physical, but he's a true freshman. And there's moments where you can see it against the blitz packages that the Badgers are throwing at him, like that's going to be a bit scary, right? If you have to go into one of these big time teams and against one of these big time defensive lines and front sevens, and you have Kevin Haywood, a true freshman out there, or somebody else gets hurt, and then you're going to that 2 deep offensive line, that second string offensive line, and you're bringing in a Colin Cubberly or whatever it is, a Cody Kadonko at center, like Joey Okla. That's a real concern, and that could derail the season. Like a couple injuries there. And you could say that probably about a lot of teams. A lot of teams probably can't lose a couple offensive linemen. But there were years where Wisconsin was much more insulated against that. There were years where you would feel much better about the Wisconsin 2 deep on the offensive line. And quite frankly, I love the young players on the offensive line. We talked about them. I love Emerson Mandel. I love Kevin Haywood. I love Colin Cubberly. I like Derek. I love Ryan Corey. I love the young dudes on this offensive line. I think the future is incredibly bright, but the future shouldn't be year one of their careers necessarily. So I am a little concerned there. I think the pass rush looked good. I'm a little worried about the offensive line depth. I think it's potentially a real problem. Just for context, they have Emerson Mandel, the 4-star offensive lineman they got out of Minnesota, a player Justin's really high on, a player I'm really high on, huge physical skill set. Brady Collins loves him. They didn't really throw the ball in his high school. Like he was more of an option team, a run heavy team. He's the second string right tackle right now. Like it's a little sketchy. And again, there's no knock or he's an incredibly talented young player, but there's a reason young true freshmen usually aren't playing or counted on in big depth roles. So I would track that. It does make the Joey Okla pickup look even better. Getting the former Wisconsin kid out of Illinois, just had some depth there. Manny Mullins has been on the 2 deep a little bit. You're going to need those young players to grow up quick, because you're not going to make it through an entire season with no injuries. So you're going to need them to grow up quick. All right, let's take a quick break. I want to come back. We have a couple comments already. I want to highlight a couple amazing people I met already down here in Platteville, which is awesome. And then I want to talk a little bit about TVD again, the performance he had yesterday, which was a whole lot of good. And then again, it's the TVD roller coaster, one throw that kind of made you scratch your head. We'll talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends over at eBay Motors. eBay Motors is the number one source if you need anything for your car. Like, you know the deal. Go to eBay Motors, right? They have every part you're going to be looking for. You can get it easier, faster, and cheaper. So what's the downside? There's not one. You don't have to go into the store and talk to some person who doesn't really want to be there, who may not have your part, who's just trying to get you out of the store so you can go back to playing Sudoku. Go to eBay Motors. Get the right parts, the right fit, the right prices for your ride or die. Keep your ride or die alive over at eBay Motors. You're burning rubber. You're not burning cash. Keep your ride or die alive over at eBay Motors. The right parts, the right fit, the right prices. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Today's episode also brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. I love sports. You love sports. This is a way to spice up your sports weekend. Again, do it responsibly, but all summer long, FanDuel is hooking up customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's all summer long over at FanDuel.com. Futures, parlays, teaser spreads at Wisconsin over under was 6.5 at one point. I think it's up to 7.5 now. Listen, this is a fun way just to spice up your weekend, test your knowledge, have a little bit of fun. User interface is great. You actually get paid out. It's not like one of those wonky sites where you got to fight to get your money when you win. FanDuel.com is incredible, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball, of the Locked On Podcast Network. Go over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most of your summer with their daily boosts and their bonuses. All right, let's talk TVD, and let's get some comments and some thoughts here. So again, I thought TVD was much like the practice we saw on Wednesday. I thought TVD was really pretty good for the most part, right? He stepped up in the pocket. He had a couple of really nice plays. We talked about that blitz pickup. We talked about the blitz. We talked about some of the offensive line stuff. There was a couple of really nice plays. TVD stepping up in the pocket. We've tracked consistently his ability to run with the ball, be decisive, but he also showed moments in this practice where he stepped up in the pocket, kept his head up, found Tretch down the field, I think he had one where he found Bryson Green down the field, right? If he starts putting those pieces together where he's making the reads, delivering quickly on time, he's pulling and tucking, and he's also extending plays in the pocket. If he's doing those three things, that trifecta, and he in moments this year, he's going to be an absolute nightmare for defensive coordinators. The ability to step up in the pocket, feel that rush, not panic, still deliver the throw. Now, he's not getting hit in practice. I always want to caveat that. Like, it's important to understand no matter how experienced you are, it is a different animal in the regular season when quarterbacks are getting hit. I don't think there's any argument there. But I thought TVD for the most part looked under control. He looked good. And then he had that one play. Right? We've talked about it. We talked about the TVD coaster. This is what Miami fans talked about. Like, he's going to be good. And then he came back and he threw just a really poor throw. Had a bad decision. Lofi picked it off. Lofi was in kind of an underneath hook zone, just kind of sitting there. TVD was on the left side of the field scanning, came back to the right side, tried to get it to Bryson, and he just never saw Lofi, or saw him too late, or he thought he could lace it over him. Those are the moments, right? Those are the moments. If he had just hit the R3 button on that one and thrown it out of bounds, I think you'd walk away from this practice saying, man, that was really good. That was a really good time from TVD. Like, pretty flawless in terms of nobody's ever going to be perfect, but pretty flawless from what you're expecting from him. I mean, he threw a couple dimes. He had this great throw to Tretch under the safety, over the underneath zone, laced it into the sidelines. He had once again, a couple really nice passes over the middle. That's maybe been the most impressive part of his game for me, is his ability to timing throws on slants, on crossers over the middle, kind of fitting it in between the different defenders. He's looked really good there. He had Conberry Johnson on one of those. But again, can you avoid the bad throw? Can you avoid that one dip in the roller coaster? And I'm okay with defenders making great plays. Like, if you throw a 50-50 ball, it's Bryson Green and it's some corner from Iowa, and Iowa's corner just comes up and he just wins that rep. Like, those happen. Okay, that's fine. But you can't throw the one that you threw to Lofi right there, where you just didn't see the guy. That's not the defender making a great play. That's a poor read, right? That's giving them the ball when they didn't necessarily earn it. And you got to avoid those. Can he avoid those? That's the question, right? Listen, for the most part, again, I've come away more impressed with TVD after watching him than going into it. So it was mostly really good again. And I do think, I don't mean to not talk about Braden Locke. Braden Locke had a couple of really nice throws as well. Had a couple moments where he showed his wheels. I just think TVD is kind of separated. I do think TVD is separated a little bit. I think it's his job. And we're just kind of waiting. They had a practice yesterday that wasn't open to the media. There's a scrimmage tonight we'll be going to. So we're just kind of waiting to see, in my opinion, only my opinion, this is not from anywhere, but I'm always going to be real with y'all. I think we're just kind of waiting for the coaches to make that move. But I think that move is kind of inevitable at this point. Cannon L says Pius 10+ sack season incoming. I don't think so anymore. I would have said potentially before the year, and I still think he probably could lead the Badgers in sacks. I don't know. I haven't seen quite as much of him winning the one-on-ones as I expected. But I think there might be pressure. I think there's going to be pressure from a lot of spots. I'm not that worried about the pass rush this year, so I don't want that to sound negative. She said, Bucky, after going to yesterday's practice, I'm a little nervous about the offense line. Yes, dude. You and me both. That's a little stressful. And that could derail the whole year, right? If they lose two guys, there's teams out there that can absorb a couple losses on the offensive line. The Badgers are not one of them, in my opinion, this year. Maybe depending on who it is. Like, I don't want to get too into the weeds on that, and I'm just going to hope that they stay healthy. Yeah, there's some questions about the depth there for sure. She said, Bucky said TVD has an arm and can make any throw. Ryan was right about his decision making. There's some moments, we just talked about it. He's got to clean up those. It's hard to play quarterback, right? I'm not going to sit here and say it's a rookie mistake, but he can't make those throws, right? He can't make those decisions where the defensive back doesn't have to make a great play, where it's just to him because it's a bad read. Greg Lincecum, who we got to see yesterday, that was a lot of fun. I just hope the freshmen play a lot in the first two games to get them up to speed. I think that's the goal, right? Those first two games, Wisconsin should be able to put it on them, given the level of competition. And I would hope to see a lot of those freshmen, especially, and this is a good point from Greg's bringing up, especially along that offense line. If you can get a lot of those freshmen, you get a lot of reps maybe for Haywood and Mandela and Coverly and Kadonko. Maybe you get them up to speed a little bit in those first two games. I think that's a really good point. John Luke says, have the deep passes improved? There wasn't a ton in the open practice that I saw, like true deep vertical routes. There was, there was a decent amount of those intermediate routes along the sideline or across the middle, like the 10 to 25 yard variety. I'm trying to remember if there were any real deep routes. Pauling hit one in the one-on-one drills. I know Pauling got one. Pauling also dropped one. I would say TBD on that, John. I would say TBD on that one. TJ24 need to get blowout wins. The good old up by 40 in Indiana would help the development. Yeah. And listen, not only help the development, that's a great point from TJ. It keeps the starters from getting hurt, right? The less reps you put out there, the less time you're on the field. And listen, it's football. It is what it is. You're going to get hurt. I mean, it's a physical game. We all know this. But if you can get a couple occasional fourth quarters off with that offensive line, it keeps them a little fresher and it reduces the risk of injury. Yeah, let's get a couple blowouts. And I think early non-conference games, those first two could be that for sure. Cannon says, I think Pius will do a much better job versus teams as he's going up against two really good tackles. That's 100% agree. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. He's going up against two really good. Listen, Malman and Nelson are good. Those are really good bookend tackles. And they're also bookend tackles that know Pius' game at this point. It's going to be a bit of a surprise when he's going up against players who haven't practiced against him and who, quite frankly, aren't on the caliber of Nelson and Malman. Those are both NFL-type tackles. I think both are going to get a shot in the league. Pius has talked about it. Lowry's talked about it, about how good they are and about the challenge they have going up against those two every day. I think it's a good point. I agree there. Stephen Keel says, you think the O-line is okay to average because the D-line is really average at best? I'm trying to see. Let's see. Do you think the offense line is okay to average because the defense line is really average at best? I think the starting five. Let me try to. Maybe I'm misinterpreting your question there. That's my fault. The starting five offensive line, I think, is actually really good. I think the starting five offensive line is a really good to potentially really, really good college offensive line if they can stay healthy. Renfro's a really good player. Brunner's a really good player. The tackles are really good. Huber is a workmanlike guy who's great with technique, and a really physical intensity veteran. This group has played a ton of football. Like, it's a really extremely experienced group. They're physical. They're big. I think the starting five is really solid, and I think they cause the defense line issues in practice. My concern is 100% what happens when you lose one of those guys or two of those guys. I think it's a very legitimate concern because you're not often going to go through a season with no offensive line injuries. So, yeah, I think the offensive line is good. I think the upside from the young guys is incredibly high. Like, in 2 or 3 years, you're going to look at a line with Manziel and Corey and Haywood and Watts and Powell. And, I mean, I think you're going to be real Jensen and Cover. I mean, you can go down the list. Like, there's 10 guys in the last 2 classes. There's a lot of dudes. And in 2 or 3 years, I think that's going to look really impressive if the development happens. But we're not 2 or 3 years down the road. So, yeah, this year it's a little stressful. All right, let's wrap it up there. Oh, Jan Volk said, are the receivers looking good? I thought it was a good day for him. Continue to see Liz Pauling's really good. Treach gets open. I still think against some of the elite physical, like against Bama, against Oregon, I think we have some issues separating. Yeah, I think it's a solid receiver room with a couple guys who can probably get open on just about anybody, and then a couple other guys who are going to have to win some contested catches. But I definitely think it's a good enough receiver room. I think it's better than what we've had the last couple of years. I think it's better than you look in some of those Mertz years. I think this room is better. I think it's deeper. I think there's more problems inside the room. But they're going to have to prove it against the really good secondaries, because there are moments in coverage. There are moments against our secondary where nobody's getting open. And I think a lot of that is, I think our secondary, so I've talked about it, I think our secondary is pretty legit. I think it's a really good secondary that they have this year. Credit to Ball Haynes, credit to some of the people they brought in. But you would like to see a little more separation at times too. It again goes back to that practice thing of when one side is doing a little better, you get mad. Like, it is what it is. But I do think that was kind of a rambling answer, Jan. I'm sorry, but I do think the receiver room is good. I like what I've seen. I think it might struggle a little bit against the elite secondaries. Alien Space, do you see some Trace McSorley vibes with TVD? Oh man, that's really interesting. Not really, if I'm going to be honest. Although I can get the vibe, right? I can get the vibe of a guy who can occasionally will make a lot of wow throws and occasionally just throw a really silly one. But McSorley was a little more creative in the pocket, more able to create time in the pocket, dodge people, scramble around back there. McSorley had a little bit more of like that Russell Wilson-ish type ability in the pocket to stick around and just extend. A little, definitely smaller guy. But no, it's an interesting comp. It's an interesting question. Wesley James says, every year I hear how good the offense line will be, time will tell. That's a very fair point, Wes. Yeah, that's a very fair point. There's been a lot of Wisconsin lines that have been pretty hyped coming into the year that haven't delivered. And I think that's very fair. Bo Dragon says, if they can't separate in practice, how will they separate against Bama? That's just what I said, Bo. I don't know. Yeah, no, I agree. I like that's the question I have too. I think it's going to be a potential issue in practice. Now, I do think some of that you can scheme up, and some of that you have guys who I do think separate in practice. I think guys like Tretch and Pauling have been able to separate in practice. But again, it goes back to those boundary guys. I don't know if the Bryson Greens, Vinnies, the those outside receivers are going to separate really well against Bama, Oregon, Penn State's, Iowa's corners, those kind of things. So I do think that is a bit of an issue. Let's see. Badger Bournemouth, after seeing what you have seen, do you think we can beat the better teams on the schedule? I don't know. Like, honestly, it's tough because I haven't seen those teams. I don't want to, I'm not a cop out answer guy. I'm kind of where I was. Like, I don't think we're going to lose to all the tough teams. I really don't. I still think we can get Penn State. I think we can get USC. You could also lose both those, but I think we're good enough to beat those teams. I don't. Bama's tough, man. Bama's really tough, and Oregon is really good and deep. I think we are Badger Bournemouth. I really think we are, but I don't know if my thought on that has changed a lot through fall practice because those teams are going to get better too. Listen, USC is going to be better. Hiring a real defensive coordinator. They got 2 or 3 impact transfer guys, including guys in the secondary. They're going to be better. Iowa's going to be a bloodbath. So, yeah, I think we're good enough. I really do. I think this team is talented. There's a lot of interesting pieces here. If the offensive line can stay healthy, I think this could be a really good team. And so, yeah, that means you're beating a couple of those teams, at least one of them. So I'm right there with you. All right, let's wrap it up there. Another show coming tonight. We have a live. We're going to get a scrimmage tonight, which I'm really excited about, open to the media. So I'll be there. Hit me up if you want me to keep a certain eye on a player, a certain player, or anything like that. And I also want to give a shout out. Man, I met some awesome dudes down here. People who are like in the community. I got to meet Honcho. We went out for some food. Got some local stories of Platteville with him and Jeremy. That was awesome. Got to meet Don last night. Don, trucker, football coach, like a cook, much better than me. I'm excited to maybe get some wing recipes off of him. That was awesome. Greg Lincecum, Corey, Justin came down, Nick Osen, obviously the playmaker, Curtis Holland was there. I beat Tim Olson, who's in the show notes at times. So yeah, it was awesome. Thank you so much for stopping by, hanging out, going to Potosi with me. And I hope to do more of that kind of stuff this year. So that was absolutely phenomenal, and really appreciate all those dudes for stopping by and really having good conversations, breaking some bread, drinking some beer, having a little bourbon, and having some great convo. So on Wisconsin, appreciate all you guys. Show tonight after the scrimmage under the lights. We'll talk about what we see. On Wisconsin, let's talk later.